That is so good. Guten gardening, everybody. Directly behind me, there is a sea of a particular kind of plant, and many people would probably call this a weed, especially considering how quickly it spreads. And this plant has some incredible health benefits. And much like we talked about purslane as an edible weed, we talked about lamb's quarter as an edible weed, today we're going to focus in on the stinging nettle. Now, unlike those other two edible weeds that we focused on, this one will bite you back. And that's the reason why I've got some gloves on today before I handle any of the leaves on this plant. So we've got a whole bunch of stinging nettle. Here, I'll raise the camera up so you can see what I'm talking about. Literally a sea of this stuff, and actually I've waited so long that now it's about 6 feet tall in some spots. So yeah, it's about to go to seed. When it does, this thing releases so many additional seeds. So where we started with just a little bit of this stinging nettle a couple years ago, it is now everywhere. So I think it's probably pretty important that we find a way to make use of at least some of this. I'm going to take the top off of this particular stinging nettle plant. Now, the stinging nettle out here has actually been growing for a couple of months, and so they're about 4 to 6 feet tall, and they're starting to go to seed. And you can see all of these spots here. These are the seeds that are going to spread. And once they dry out, that's exactly what they do. If I hit this, once it's dry, it's like a powder of seeds flying everywhere. They're tiny little seeds, and they will spread like crazy. And you can see just how many hundreds are at the top of this singular plant. And so that's why we get a lot of these spreading quickly. Now, stinging nettle has been used for its medicinal benefits for hundreds of years all across Europe, Scandinavia, and my readings suggest that it's becoming a little bit more popular here in the United States. It's certainly prevalent enough that you would think people would need to find some kind of use for it. But it's used in teas, it's used in soups, and depending what part of the globe you live in, you may have a different traditional purpose to use this stinging nettle. Actually, I'd love for you to leave the main way you prepare this stinging nettle in the comments. We'd love to try a few things. And in today's video, I'm actually going to make some stinging nettle tea. So that, in addition to making this video, I'm out here to try stinging nettle tea for the first time ever. So I'm going to be collecting some of these leaves. I'll talk about which leaves I'm collecting and why as we move forward as well. I should also mention that my younger daughter calls this the burning plant because of the strong burning sensation you get if you touch this with your bare skin. And actually, I should probably be wearing long sleeves, but I'm going to be careful out here. So first, let's get really up close and take a look at the leaves, and let's talk about why this is called stinging nettle. And I'm just going to pick one stem here. It's about 4 feet tall of this stinging nettle, and you'll notice the leaves are pretty far apart toward the bottom, and as I get closer to the top, they become more prolific, closer together. And actually, these smaller, younger leaves are the ones that I'm going to harvest. They're the ones I want to harvest for tea, for dehydrating, etc. Apparently, these larger, older leaves can have pretty rough patches even when they're cooked, to make them less delicious. But I'm going to pull one of these bigger leaves off, and we're going to inspect it. The look is actually pretty unique in my opinion. I'm not sure that this looks like any other plant. It's pretty obvious. Along the stem, I'll pull this off a little bit closer to the side. Along the stem, if you look really close, you can see those, there we go. You see those little tiny points coming off of it, sticking out. Those are called trichomes, and those are going to sting you. And the leaves are covered in these trichomes. Now, to try to explain trichomes, my understanding is they're kind of like little tiny hypodermic needles. And when they come into contact with your skin, the edges of them, oh, I can feel them as I rub my finger against the grain here. When they come into contact with your skin, they break open. The tips of them break off. And that's when you get a lot of, it's like a physical and a chemical reaction, because there's actually several different chemicals then that the trichomes release into your skin. And the chemicals that are injected in your skin include histamine, acetylcholine, formic acid, and serotonin. And you know, antihistamines are pretty popular for a reason. So all of those different chemicals are being placed into your skin when you come into contact with this. So it's no wonder that it's going to sting and burn and not feel very good. And that's why I'm wearing gloves, because I don't want to deal with that. To be honest, there have been many instances where I've accidentally brushed against on my arm, on the inside of my hand. That happened yesterday, and the stinging sensation lasted for me about 2 hours. Now it varies, I guess, maybe depending on where you get into contact with the skin here. It probably varies based on the person, but for me, typically I can feel it for a couple of hours. I don't take anything for it. I guess you could take some sort of antihistamine or something like that to try to reduce some of that pain. But cooking these leaves actually breaks down the structure of those chemicals inside those trichomes. And so that's the reason why I wouldn't want to eat this now. I'm sure that would actually cause my mouth to feel very bad. But once I've cooked it down, I'm not going to have those same results. I'm going to actually just be able to enjoy. Again, this will be my first time trying it. It'll be my first time drinking it as a tea. Now, interestingly enough, I actually first really heard about the medicinal benefits of stinging nettle from a Turkish TV series. I watched an episode of it, and I remember one of the characters saying, I'm going to go put my gloves on, and I'm going to go gather up some nettle and make you some soup, which is apparently a pretty popular way to consume this in Turkey because the other person wasn't feeling well. Okay, well, I'm not making soup today, but I am going to make tea from this. But I think when something is so painful, when you put it up against your skin as this, there's a reason why a lot of people might be hesitant to try this, because you have to believe that something that is so painful could actually be so good for you and not painful once you cook it. Oh, also dehydrating apparently has a similar effect to cooking. I don't know if it takes a little bit longer or what have you to reduce the effect of the chemicals inside. Again, most of the time people will cook this, boil it, or dehydrate it to use for later. One thing's for sure, this is not impacting my skin at all, collecting it like this, because I've got these gloves on. And again, what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna pull these leaves off from the top. I want a handful of these so that I can make this tea. The recipe that I read online for this was about a cup of these leaves, washed and rinsed nicely, to 2 cups of boiling water. So let me just get these off of here and we'll continue our conversation. You know, it was always interesting when I look at my purslane video from back in the day, so many people were a little bit upset that I called it a weed. But again, it's just treated, these different plants are treated so differently depending on the country where they grow and how people have traditionally used them. And so to me, it's always interesting to watch or hear people say, no, we grow it this way, or this is so valuable, or use it this way. Well, today we're gonna try to take advantage of a plant that's supposed to have a ton of health benefits. By the way, I know that this area is never sprayed. I bet you could find this a lot. If it's not on your property, you could probably find this locally, because again, it's everywhere. I've seen this in a lot of different places, but I don't go foraging or finding anything that's I don't know hasn't been sprayed, because the last thing I want to do is add some pesticide to my diet. All right, I'd say that's probably enough. All right, I'm gonna start by getting 2 cups of water boiling here. And then of course I want to rinse off all these leaves, any kind of little bugs or anything else that might be on here. All right, we are just up at the point where we're getting a nice rolling boil now. So this is the point where I'm going to add all of our stinging nettle leaves. Just pour it right in there. And then I'm going to turn off the heat. I'm just going to let this steep for 10 to 15 minutes. All right, it's been 15 minutes. Oof, let off the steam. I'll go ahead and take all the leaves out. I'm going to strain this in here anyway, just in case there are a little bit of spare pieces out there. I see a few floating around. All right, let's take a look first at the color of the tea. Just a nice, I mean, it looks like a regular green tea to me, maybe a little bit darker than a green tea. Now, in terms of smell, it definitely doesn't smell like green tea. It smells more like hay. You know, hay that's been sitting around for a while? That's what it smells like to me. All right. Now, I know that they say you can sweeten this up, add some honey or add some lemon to it, what have you, but if I'm going to try this, I want to get the actual baseline taste of nettle tea. So this is my first ever taste. Let's see what it tastes like. It's not a strong taste. There's something comforting about that. I don't even know if that makes sense. There's something comfortable or comforting about this taste. I would say there's like a hint. I don't even know if this makes sense. There's like a hint of mintiness to it. Not a lot, but a hint of that. Definitely that hay smell. There's a tiny bit of that in terms of flavor. That's really good. That's really good. Now I'm questioning everything. Why haven't I been saving this for years? Especially given some of the purported benefits. Now I'm going to use the National Library of Medicine as my source, although I found this information repeated on multiple sources, and this is just one article about the stinging nettle benefits. And first I'm going to start with the nutritional value here. There's a table that gives some averages, and you can see that this is going to be a good source of vitamin B3, 12% of the daily value, vitamin A and vitamin K for sure, great source of magnesium, manganese, calcium, and a good source of fiber. And so off the top, even before any of the other purported medical benefits, you've got a really nutritious plant. And if we look at this chart, you can see a pretty expansive number of things that people claim stinging nettle is beneficial for. And these claims, as far as I can tell, are linked to various studies that show that these actually have some positive effect. Aiding in pregnancy, improving blood circulation, heart health, gastrointestinal health, anti-diabetic properties, and boosting the immune system are just a few. I mean, you can see all of these. I don't need to read all of them to you, but we're looking at a plant that has substantial potential health values that is treated just like a weed. I mean, that's a pretty extensive list there of potential benefits. And again, there's so many different ways that people consume this plant. And as I said, here in the US, typically this is just seen as a weed. And I know, if you don't want a plant, that makes it a weed, right? Well, the fact that this is everywhere, what I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna gather up a whole bunch of this. There's no way I can let it spread out into our garden any more than it has. So I'm gonna gather up as many of those younger leaves as possible, and I'm gonna put those in the dehydrator, dehydrate a whole bunch of this. I'm gonna make some more tea too. Wow, that is, the more I try this, the more I like it. Okay, so stinging nettle. It'll burn you if you're not careful, so wear gloves. But it's a plant with so many possible benefits. It's been used for so long. You know, a lot of times if a plant's been used for hundreds of years and people swear by it, well, hopefully they know what they're talking about. So if you have this plant growing nearby in your backyard like we do, why don't you try it out and see what you think? Again, if you let it go to seed, this stuff is going to spread everywhere. So maybe that's not your goal, but maybe get your hands on a few of these leaves and try it out. Folks, as I mentioned earlier, if you have a recipe, a way of preparing this that's traditional for you, I'd love to hear all about that. This is like a brand new avenue for me to head down, where I can see a plant like this that again is typically treated like a weed that I can now enjoy the benefits of. Hey, if you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.